Hello, hello, and welcome to another episode of For the Love of Sports. My name is Michael Rasile, and this is a show where I get to talk about sports, I get to talk about business, and I get to talk about everything in between. Today, my incredible guest, Jesse. He's the head of social at Just Women's Sports. Jesse, how you doing today, buddy?
I'm good. I'm good. Hanging in there. How are you?
Hanging in. It's a good day to be alive, man. It's Friday. The Super Bowl's in a couple days. That means I get to eat chicken wings and drink beer and sit on my couch. I'm very excited for that. I already
Right.
placed a bunch of bets. We're here in New Jersey, so that makes life a lot easier. But Jesse, I'm very excited to get to chat with you. Obviously, had Haley on from Just Women's Sports. She is an incredible person. What she was able to build and how she was able to build it, and now starting to create that team around her to help elevate you guys as high as possible. I'm very excited to talk about. But Jesse, the first question I have for everybody on the For the Love of Sports podcast is, why do you love sports so much?
Ooh, starting this off nice and juicy.
Yeah, it's going to come back around to whatever your answer is. I usually figure out how to kind of bring it back in at the end. So do your thing, man.
Yeah, no, I guess, yeah. Why do I love sports? I guess I love it for, I love everything about it. I think it's the theatrics, the drama, competition, um, camaraderie. I think growing up, I played rec sports. I was not good, still not good at sports, but still love playing basketball occasionally. It's one of those things that I think it kept me busy. It was fun. My brothers, we all love to play and watch sports together. So it was like one of those things that, like as you kind of grow, you kind of learn to love different parts and different aspects of it. I think growing up it was, playing and being involved and having all the teammates and kind of go through the motions of being a player. And then now as a fan, sitting back, watching the game, analyzing, there's so many different things. Sorry, my phone is like blowing up.
Hey, man, you're
So
you're an
many
important
different things.
person.
Yeah, but not that important. No, but yeah, like kind of all those things wrapped together, and then now you kind of see it from like the fan side and from working within sports. I think it was always something that I wanted to do, and I wasn't sure how to make my way into it. But now that I'm in it, it kind of is. It's come full circle, and I've kind of been able to kind of immerse myself within sports. So yeah, why do I love it? I think it basically is my life. So in
I
one
love
way
it.
or another, yeah.
100%. I'm with you on that train. My schedule is based around whatever games are on. I do, and my friends we hang out based around usually, now that everyone got sick, unfortunately, but it was every Sunday. We would just hang out and do whatever we needed to do and watch a bunch of football. So it's, everything is based around it. 100% agree. And you were talking about the drama and the theatrics. I still don't get why people watch reality TV shows. You can just throw on a basketball game, a college
Right.
basketball game, especially. You never know what the hell an 18-year-old kid is going to do. Throw on a college basketball game, and I promise you, you're going to see the drama. So I don't know why people watch Keeping Up with the Kardashians. To each his own. I'm not here to judge. It's just, you ask me, you get more entertainment out of a football or a baseball or a basketball game than you would a hockey game. Hockey game sounds weird, but a hockey game, if just watch the last 3 minutes, that is intense, and that's what we love about it. So very excited to talk to you about kind of how you then got into sports. I think that part is very important. I also just wanted to point out, I spoke about it before, but Jesse and I had some classes at Rutgers together. So both Rutgers alums, both doing our thing and here to
Rah
take over the
rah.
world. So are you rah rah? Exactly. I like that. So one of your first jobs out of school, it looks like, was with VaynerMedia. Now, anybody that's been on the internet, we'll call it, for the last 5 years, is pretty familiar with Gary Vee, what he's been able to do, what he's been able to build. I actually had the opportunity to interview AJ Vaynerchuk for my book, which was really cool. So they're doing some awesome shit over there as well. And actually just had someone else from VaynerMedia on as well, Darren Glover. But what what was that opportunity like? So you get this job 6 years ago, and this is kind of like the come up of Gary Vee, in my opinion. That's when everybody started to know who he was and what he was doing. What attracted you to want to work at a company like that that was really starting to make leaps and bounds in the digital marketing space?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of said it yourself. We went to Rutgers together. We went through the same program, so we have that same come up. And I think what I learned from the business school was, I wanted to be within marketing. I wanted to be within advertising, but I wasn't necessarily sure where. I did actually work at Rutgers at the rec program, doing all their social and doing things like that. So I was like, oh, this could be a space to play. And I was like, well, how do I even get into this? I wasn't a Gary Vee fan, but actually my boss at the time, he at Rutgers, he was like the biggest stan, and like we would watch his TED talks, and I was like, who the fuck is this guy? Like he's just yelling at the TV or whatever he's doing. Like he'd be on like Jimmy Fallon or something, and
Mhm.
you have to watch his interviews. And I'd be like, he's just yelling. I was like, I don't really know who this guy is. Fast forward a few months later, we graduate. I'm looking for a job. I'm like, oh my God, I don't know what to do. I don't even know how to get a job. Um, and I'm applying places. We actually, one of my old coworkers from that rec program was working at Vayner on the paid team. It was like, hey, like, are you interested in like, it was like micro content, and I was like, sure. It's like I'll do anything at this
Sounds
point.
great.
Yeah, he's like, my company's hiring. It turns out, so I got like a tour and everything. I went and I was like, yeah, I could probably do this. And I got hired. So I applied to be like a micro content producer, which at the time I guess was like a copywriter, but just a different name. And they were like, yeah, you're not qualified for this, but we have this like community manager position. And you learn the ropes, you take the sticks, you lead these brands. And I was like, okay, sure, why not? So really like my start into Vayner, I guess, is a little bit unconventional because I wasn't looking for it. At that time I was like, I just need a job. And then that job actually turned out to be 6 years. So
Yeah.
it was
Yeah,
a wild ride.
it clearly worked out. And again, most people know who Gary Vee is now. As you said, it was just some guy screaming on the internet. Turns out he's been right about most of the shit he's been screaming about. I guess, what was it like once you got there and then kind of learning more about who Gary Vee is and the culture and everything around it? Like, how much did that start to envelop? Like, oh, wait, this is actually pretty cool. I'm really glad that I ended up just kind of being like, sure, I need a job. And here's one.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I learned pretty much everything from social, from Vayner. I mean, I learned a little bit at Rutgers to just get into the space, but then not even knowing what I was getting into, but they kind of trusted me as somebody who, you had an interest and a passion for it. And almost like 7 years ago now, or 6.5 years ago now, it wasn't what the landscape is today. So like if you had an interest and you had a passion for things, for me, it was literally sports. So I think in my interview, they kind of recognized that, okay, he knows knows a ton about the NBA. He knows a ton about snowboarding and things like that. Let's throw him on Mountain Dew. Literally, it was as simple as kind of that type of puzzle piecing, and his kind of intuition to be able to like put people where they're supposed to be. I think set me up to where I am today. So I think early on, yeah, I didn't know who he was, and I wasn't sipping the Kool-Aid, and
Mhm.
I think that gave me a different perspective than maybe like some of the people who wanted to work there and like legit wanted to work for him. But that gave me kind of a little bit of a different relationship with him. I think I would go to him and ask him questions based off of like the Jets and us being Jets
Mhm.
fans and things like that. And it
Cool.
wasn't necessarily like something that, I wasn't trying to do anything other than learn and absorb. So I think he kind of recognized that, and that helped me kind of grow throughout Vayner.
Yeah, you weren't a fanboy, right? Like you weren't like,
Yeah,
when you see him kind of
still
your
not.
heart flutters and your stomach drops. You're like, oh my God, there's Gary Vee. You're just like, oh, cool. This guy knows. Like I can learn from him. This will be great. And it sounds like you were able to take, a lot of advantage of that. As you said, you were there for over 6 years, which I think is awesome. And kudos, or right around 6 years. So kudos and congratulations. So I gotta ask, Jesse, July 2020, or I'm assuming the process started a little bit before then, you decided to quit your job at VaynerMedia in like the height of the pandemic. I would say, I know like now more people are sick, but back then we were all just like stuck inside still and like terrified to just like go outside in your yard. I don't know how you were taking it, but that's kind of how we were feeling about it. What was hey mom, I decided to leave this giant corporate company where I'm learning a lot to go join this startup. Like what, before we get into what Just Women's Sports is, because I think obviously that's a big piece of it, where, like, why did this idea come about and why were you so excited to, I guess, take advantage of it?
Yeah. On on paper, it doesn't look like a very good decision. I
It
think at the
might not,
time,
hey, you're here now and that's all that matters. But at the time, it probably doesn't sound great.
nah, I mean, yeah, I mean, you talk about like what were your parents thinking, and it's funny because my lease ended and I moved back home, so like, oh, I'll ride this out for a few weeks, months, we'll see.
Yep.
And now we're fast forward, it's been like a full year. Um, and it's one of those things where I had those conversations with my brother, I had them with my parents, but really what it came down to was the same reason why you asked me, why do I love sports? It's always been a passion of mine, and I felt like my time at Vayner, it was long. Like people don't necessarily stay there that long, and I think I stayed because I loved it then. And towards the end of it, I kind of realized where I wanted to be, and I think some of that was within the agency world, within just like where VaynerMedia was as a company. I think I loved it early on because it felt like a startup, and we were young, and we only had like 200 employees, it became this monster. And I think that's a product of like how they hired and and how we kind of built it. But I was missing a little bit of that piece, right? So it was such a random ask. I mean, so I also shoot photography on the side, and I've been shooting for women's soccer for like 2 years now. It's like a hobby. And randomly, like the last game I shot was like the week before the pandemic. I shot the She Believes Cup for the women's national team, and I had all these pictures, and I was like, okay, I sent them over to the team Sky Blue that I was shooting for at the
Hmm.
time. And I was like, well, what do I do now? Like I could put them on my Instagram. So I was like, honestly, I was like, probably people can probably use these more than I can. I was like, they're cool and they're really dope and I really like them. But at the same time, like I can like my Instagram, I don't even know how many followers I have, like 2,000. Like nobody really actually sees them. So I was like, how do I actually get them to people who actually want them, whether it's the players or just fans in general? And I reached out to Just Women's Sports on a DM just randomly in March. And I was like, yo, like, here you go. Here's like a Dropbox link. You could just have them. Like, if you want to post them social, if you don't, I don't care. I was like, at this point, I feel like they're probably better suited for the fans of the game, like the people who would actually want to see them.
Hmm.
And it was Haley at the time running the account. And she like messages like, oh my God, this is great. Like, thank you so much. And at the time, like for a startup, like getting assets like that was, I guess, huge for them. And I was like, oh, cool. I was like, if you need me to
Hmm.
do anything else, if you need any more help, I'd love to help out. Like I love the women's side of sports. I have never actually worked in it. But at the same time, I can take some of the things that I learned from like the NBA and the NFL who I've worked with and help you guys in any capacity. And, one thing leads to another. July comes around and I had those conversations with Gary. I had the conversations with Haley and it just seemed like the right time to like make a move. And I think it wasn't necessarily like I quit my job. It was Gary saw it too. I would have conversations with him and be like, like I want to work in sports. I want to do something for myself. And this opportunity has come up. So we talked a little bit about that. And it was more along the lines of, like if you want this, like go for it. And he was very encouraging of it. And so I think knowing that I was going to be taking a leap and also knowing we were home and we were in quarantine and like Haley's in the West Coast, I'm in New Jersey, and we were able to work things out where obviously we're remote still. Um, it just seemed right. And I was like, well, if I take this leap and it doesn't work out, like what's the worst thing that could happen? So I
You
did
just go get a job at a
it.
big agency in New York City again. And
Yeah,
that's
I
the
could
worst
hop
thing that
around.
happens. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was like,
That,
why not?
that is awesome, man. I love that story. I think it's great. Like, you were giving, you're just giving first. Like you weren't looking for anything. You're like, hey, like some people see these, but way more people would see them if you guys had them. So here you go. Take all these pictures, do what you want with them. And again, as you said, as a startup, like it costs money to have a photographer go places or buy those things, and you're just willing to give it away for free. I think that is awesome. And shout out to the team over there. You guys are doing some really, really cool stuff. I think we had Haley on the show, as I said before. Definitely check it out if you haven't already. She was a couple months ago now, but absolutely fantastic. Love what you guys are doing. I signed up for all the newsletters, follow on all the socials. So now I know the man behind it, it sounds like. And I guess with that, like so just to give people a little bit of background, the way Just Women's Sports kind of started, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because it's been a little while, but Haley was pretty much just started this as an account because nobody really pays attention to, or at least from the big media companies, really pays too much attention to women's sports, which is kind of a travesty. And it's very disappointing. So she decided to start an Instagram account, Just Women's Sports, and really just started to post more and more about just women's sports. Love the name too. Really hammers the point home. So with that, she kind of started that, and that's kind of where this company came from. Essentially, it came from this Instagram account that just kept getting bigger, and then she was able to start building it into a website. And now you have reporters. Now you have more of a team. What is it like now for you to come in and learn the brand and learn everything? And I'm sure she kind of like she sees everything and she knew how she did it. Like, how does that, transition of power, quote unquote, happen so easily that no one really notices, and you're still able to, as you said, take everything you learned from the NBA and the NFL and be able to inject it to what you guys are doing there to, again, just kind of just continue to take this thing to the moon.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I think she probably said it a lot better and probably more eloquently than I did, but or I would. I think more of it, yeah, it was an Instagram account, and that's to be completely honest. She started on a whim as something that was literally as simple as the idea that women's sports just doesn't receive media attention in one way or another. So how can she, at that time, just like a fan of the game, aggregate some stuff, put some stuff together. We've seen it from House of Highlights to Overtime to Complex. You're seeing all these aggregations of sites for men's sports. Why isn't there one for women? And there's a few now, and there's a bunch that we work with. But at the same time, I guess for her, it was more, she was the athlete. She had a little bit of an edge where, she knew some of these athletes and knew some of the people that were in these clips. So for her, aggregating was probably super easy. Kind of spiraled to the point where I think she kind of didn't necessarily know how to grow it any further, or it was getting out of control. And at the same time, it literally was just like perfect timing when I reached out, because in March, you're talking like what, they're like 3 months in. So like it just happened to be opportune timing that we met. We talked a lot about strategy. And even before I was like brought on, I was willing to talk to her. It wasn't like, I'm not going to hide the secret sauce behind it. What social is, it needs attention. And I think she, as like the CEO and founder, like as you grow this thing, like you can't allocate that time. So let me help you take some of that stuff off your plate. And I think that understanding, the way that we kind of brought it in, and also, yes, I understood the men's game, but the same thing, the reason why I understood it was because I was in it and I spent hours a day just working on it. If you take that same strategy and that same attention for any brand, it'll work. And so I think, she kind of trusted me. And I think that in the early stages, I would like kind of ask her questions more so than like lead, because I didn't want to step on her toes and I didn't want to, ruin the brand per se. And then after a while, it just became kind of natural. Like you kind of learn how each other work. It's like any other job or any other team too. In team structures, you learn how people work, you learn what works best, and then as a team, we kind of move as one. So it just became kind of natural for me to figure out, this is how we should be doing things on this end. This is how I would like to run it, and this is also how Haley likes to run it. So let's merge these worlds.
There you go. And again, it's been working. You've been there since July, so congratulations. And I also like, again, as you said, you wanted to help because she's doing something really cool. And
Right.
you really, as you said, there are all these aggregate sites that already exist for men's sports. Why can't they exist for women's? And not only do you guys exist now, but I believe you're thriving. Like you have your newsletters coming out, you have your merch, you got a lot of shit going on. So as we said, the newsletter came out right before we came on. So if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the Just Women's Sports newsletter. Nice, easy. It's like 7-8 bullet points, just some of the information you might not have seen. And you get that out there because what is it? What's the tagline? You say it because I'm going to mess it up. 4%.
Only 4% of media coverage is specifically for women's sports. And we're here to change it. It makes sense. Like the more you can kind of build it. And I think the newsletter is basically what came out of just this Instagram, highlight page, right? It's okay. Visually, we can easily share clips and we can share moments, but how can we keep expanding on this, right? Then it became articles and interviews and aggregating into a newsletter. So I think it's kind of evolved. And I think that's the cool thing about Just Women's Sports is there's no rules. It's kind of like the Wild West where we see there's an opportunity to grow, like the podcast, we'll jump in and try to do it by our means. And so I think we don't ever want to turn down opportunities. So we're just trying to figure out how to do it. And I think bringing me on at the time we were able to, take Haley off of that. And then she was able to kind of build and get us deals with Heineken and things like that. So it becomes like, the more people you can kind of add and grow this, that's how the movement grows. So
100%. Yeah. I do want you to talk about the podcast a little bit. You have a U.S. women's national team soccer member running that thing. Some of those conversations are absolutely hysterical. They do some amazing. Yeah, right there. There you go. Yep, you got it. Yeah, it's the mirror effect. It's kind of annoying. I do it all the time. You do some incredible stuff, as you said. Already have a deal with Heineken. I see ads all over. Not all over. It's not overbearing, but you have partnerships with Whoop. You have partnerships with some other incredible companies as well. How So let's talk about the podcast first before we jump into the partnerships. What is your role in that, and how much pushing and how much is too much, I guess, because that is such a huge asset that you guys have that you obviously want to let everyone know, hey, if you want to hear conversations between women athletes, real talk, like real shit that's going on, and from the highest of high levels, you have Olympians on there all the time, WNBA players, incredible stuff. Like, how do you kind of navigate those waters to make sure you're doing enough, and as you said, giving it the time and attention, but not just completely overbearing all your feeds with, hey, check out the podcast, hey, check out the podcast, hey, check out the podcast?
Yeah. I mean, from my perspective, I am I lead social, so a lot of that is the little bit of the marketing efforts of how we get
Mhm.
it out on
Oh, of
certain
course.
platforms.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I do jump in for some of the strategy, some of the creative decisions and things like that. We have a great team, and I think that's what makes this all kind of work, is that all of us kind of are like-minded, and we know, there isn't really a space. I mean, there's some podcasts out there, but is there a space where you're talking to a current athlete who can talk to all these Olympians and talk to all these really, really, really successful women, and just kind of vibe? Because it's crazy, because it's like, yeah, Kelly O'Hara is super dope and like well accomplished herself, but also like super close with Haley, and like it's just like the connections we have. We're like, it doesn't make sense to not try something like this. And like, what's the worst? And it's the same thing. What's the worst that can happen? And like you said, you know, you don't want to bombard people and tell them every day, but when the product is good, I don't think it really matters how many times. I mean, you can say it a lot, and I don't think people kind of get bothered by it. So we just wanted to make sure we put out the best quality asset that we could. Obviously, it's a pandemic, so like the ways that we're rolling is like Zoom, and it's a little bit kind of janky, but the same way that me and you can connect on a podcast, why can't we do it? And so I think that was the mindset. I think it showed really well with season one, so much so that Heineken joins us for season two. Uh, but I do think 2021 moving forward, we want to. It's not just one podcast. Maybe it's more. Maybe it's others. And what are the other opportunities that we can tap into, be it basketball or hockey or other sports? And so that's kind of how we've been thinking. It's just really nice when your first one does really well.
Yeah, no, it's incredible. You guys do some awesome stuff, and I'm excited to talk more about your specific role, but definitely women in sports business. Just gonna throw it out there. This is a sports business podcast. Just gonna throw it out there. You guys do what you want, because there's so many incredible women just smashing that glass ceiling. We're seeing in the MLB now. We have, Kim Ang. If I think that's how I'm saying her name, I could totally be butchering it. I apologize, but she's now the GM of the Marlins. Like, did we ever think? Did our parents ever think they'd see something like that in their lifetime? I think that is incredible. So there's just so many incredible women doing things in the business side of sports too, that I think is very interesting. So I guess from your perspective, talk to me, Jesse. What's a day in the life like as the head of social at a sports media? Are you essentially just on call 24/7 at that point? Because if anything happens and you guys aren't covering it, that's what are we
Yeah,
doing here? That's got to
we're
be a
trying.
lot.
Social is like a 24, I guess, 7 job. I think it just becomes kind of natural as you kind of monitoring conversation. I mean, I'm not alone, and I have Haley Koppmeyer on our side too, who helps run social as well. So we're tag teaming a lot of the stuff. So monitoring conversation, it's kind of like how we are as sports fans, right? Like just naturally always on Twitter. I'm always reading. I'm always up on stuff. It just became more of like, branch out farther. Like, I'm a Knicks fan. You can only read so many Knicks Twitter accounts and so much hate about them that, like,
But
go
Emmanuel
follow.
Quickly's floater, dude, that floater is incredible.
Floater's nice.
That's all I
Floater's
see on
nice.
the internet. That is literally the only thing I see about the Knicks at this point.
Yeah, I mean that's the big takeaway there. I think but it's the same way. Like, I'm sure you get your information from places. I get it from Twitter, I get it from Reddit, I get it from across the internet. It just became more of like, how do I find more about what's actually going on? Like, what's going on in the NWHL bubble? What happened after, like, free agencies now for WNBA? It's like, okay, these are more things to track. I think as a fan of sports in general, I personally wasn't I wasn't a huge women's sports fan up until maybe 2 years ago, and it's because I didn't know about it. And it's like sad, and it's kind of, I feel guilty about it. But now that I'm in it, I'm like, this is great. Like, the same way why you asked in the beginning, why do you love sports? For everything that I loved about, growing up, like Michael Jordan is the same that you can say about Candace Parker's, and right. And so I think, like, those are the storylines we're trying to take away. So from a social perspective, it sucks when something happens at like 11 p.m. at night, but at the same time, it's exciting because if it's big news and it's big enough to post about or to share, then it's like, for us, we have to use our platform and our vehicle to get that across. So I mean, it stinks, but at the same time, like, it's cool at the same time.
Yeah, you're still talking to a lot of people about something that they love, and I think that's the important part. You're dealing in passion at that point, and that
Right.
doesn't get it does not get much better than that. So you're talking about monitoring conversation and understanding kind of what's going on in the world. So one thing that just happened very recently, and again, I'm kind of curious where you stand on this. Just thought of it now, so hey, we'll do it live with the NWHL. Obviously,
Yes.
they've been in their bubble for a while. They were doing some incredible things. And then I think it was last week, maybe it was early this week. I actually don't know. Time kind of doesn't exist here for me anymore. But everything that happened with Barstool, right? Erica Nardini has
Yeah.
been a huge advocate for this league. She's had the players on her show. They've been talking about it. And then some of the players come out, some of the writers come out, and some of the people at the NWHL come out and pretty much renounce Barstool and what they've done. How, from a, just trying to gain perspective, just trying to gain any eyeballs. Like, I understand, like, if you don't like Barstool, you don't like Barstool. They're very much an acquired taste. How did you guys view that? I mean, I don't know if you guys went into it deep on your side or anything, but like, how did you view something like that? Seeing like, hey, there's starting to finally be like a little extra push from a pretty big person in the space that wants to love it. And then the sport kind of comes in and the people kind of come in and almost like shut that down essentially. Like, again, there's a lot of different sides of this conversation. I'm not saying one is right and one is wrong, but how did you guys kind of see that play out? And what do you feel kind of on your end of the spectrum?
Yeah, I think from our perspective, and it's tough. I think there's a lot of different variables to the
Of course.
conversation, but at the same time, as a person, like we all have our own opinion, and I think across the board, we talked about it internally. I think most of our platform as just women's sports is we roll with the athletes. We're always
Mhm.
athlete first. We roll
Okay.
basically through the lens of what is the general conversation, and obviously there are times for us to step in, there are times to not step in. And so certain things that we're monitoring for, like the Barstool conversation, is what's the full story? How do we kind of absorb? How do we write about this as an editorial section, or in the editorial section? How do we write about it in the newsletter? How do we write about it on Twitter? How do we speak about these things? When it came out, yeah, it's tough. It's tough because on one hand, it's like, yeah, Barstool's huge. Barstool has the viewership. Barstool has the following that typically doesn't necessarily, I would say, typically doesn't overlap with women's sports. It's very male focused. It's one of those things that now that they're talking about it on paper, yes, it would seem like a good idea that a lot of people can see this thing, but from an authenticity standpoint, it didn't feel right for the NWHL, and for the players, they didn't feel comfortable with it. And at the end of the day, it's all about the players, right? So you kind of back the decision. I think for me, I completely agree with the players, and I think if you don't feel comfortable with a brand, if you don't feel comfortable with a vehicle or an outlet that's trying to push your sport, it's tough. It's a internal battle that you're struggling, but you're also afforded the opportunity to use your voice and use your own platform to say whatever you want. And if people like it, people don't like it, that's their opinion. And I think that's kind of how we sit. So we've been amplifying, what they've been saying. We've been amplifying kind of and monitoring the conversation around it. I don't think it's going away anytime soon, whether it's the NWHL or if it's another league. Um, it's just going to be a matter of, as women's sports grows, they'll find authentic partnerships that feel better, and maybe those conversations don't happen.
Yeah, yeah, and it was just an interesting kind of, obviously with all the Reddit stock stuff going on. Like last week was just nuts for the internet. Definitely one fun week to be on Twitter. And you're right, it's you guys are athlete focused. I think more we've seen what the NBA does, and they're very athlete focused. The NFL is essentially just quarterback focused. Outside of that, they don't seem like they give a shit about anybody. So it's, if you can attach to those athletes, and again, you're right. There's a lot of women that came out and said, we don't want Barstool to do anything with this. But then there was other players that who have been, on some of those shows that were like, dude, this is awesome. Like, thank you for this. So it is really interesting. Again, you have the platform, you get your own opinion. We're all social media. We can say whatever the hell we want at this point. So it definitely makes it very interesting. And then, as you said, being athlete focused, now it looks like Barstool might make their own women's hockey league. So it's just something extra for you guys to cover. And hey, if the women want to be there and do their thing and get paid for it, hell yeah, let's go for it. So again, we all get our own opinions. We all can do what we want with it. And then I like to be positive, but it's just a question you kind of always have to ask. Like, the comment section on the internet is just the worst place in the absolute world to be. Like, how do you go about, again, being the head of social, loving women's sports, wanting to push, again, positivity and all these great women that are doing great things? I try not to look at the comment section because it's usually just assholes, but something you guys kind of have to do. How frustrating is it just to see dumb people being dumb here in the year 2021?
I think I'm so conditioned for this. I mean, I think some of my brands that I've worked on, like a Mountain Dew, you see everything. I've
Oh yeah.
been through the gamut. So I'm bulletproof at this point. But at the same time, yeah, there's millions of dumb people on the internet, and everybody has an opinion, but you kind of have to sift through. And I think a lot of the times for us, we've built a pretty authentic audience that our comment section, knock on wood, like hopefully the bots don't take over tomorrow and they see this, but it's been pretty good because if you want to follow us, the name speaks for itself. Like you shouldn't be
Yeah.
on our page if you hate women's. Why would you do that? And so like, why would you waste your time and why would you waste your energy? And also like when it happens, like we're okay with, you know, having a discussion on there. Like if you really want to have a real discussion, sure, we'll have one. If you want to be a troll, like we'll delete your comment. Like I don't care. And so like if you want to come back and say it again, like I'll like we can go back and forth. So I think like for us it's kind of second nature, I think, and us as a brand, but also women in general. Like it's the internet. And it sucks. And it's one of those things where we're not gonna take shit from people on the internet trying to be a big tough guy. So like for us, we're just gonna stand for what we believe in. A lot of people seem to believe in it, and we'll keep those conversations, the good ones, going.
I love it. Positivity, man. That's what we're all about. I just don't, it's just so insane to me. Again, 2021, like, guys, what are we doing? Like, what are we doing? Like, who cares?
Yeah.
Just get out of here. Like,
Like
whatever. Trolls are gonna troll. That's really all you can say about
exactly.
that one. So, more positive that's coming from this, as you said, the Heineken deal that was just announced for season 2 of the podcast. Obviously, as I said before, you guys have a partnership with Whoop in some capacity as well. They're doing some incredible things. How do you guys find this stuff coming about? And I guess are these brands reaching out to you saying like, we want to tap into this audience because we think women's sports, that 4% is going to grow to 5 to 6 to 10 to 12 to 15 to hopefully close to a nice 50-50 split sooner rather than later. Jumping in early is, you know, how you really grow that brand affinity. How do you guys have these conversations? How do you pick and choose? Like, was Heineken the only beer brand? Was they the first beer brand? Like, how do you go about making sure that the partnerships are authentic to your audience and making sure that hey, you guys need money. Like, let's be very honest, you're a media company, but also making sure that you think the followers and the fans and the advocates for your brand will be interested in that.
Yeah, I mean, early on, I think it was us shopping a little bit, and it was saying, you know, this thing exists, and it was
This
like
exists.
for
Yeah.
the I think that's the hardest part is like getting the awareness across. For Heineken, it was basically they saw the first season. We didn't have a branded like partnership with anybody on that. We knew it was good, and we knew we wanted to put it out regardless of if there was a brand's name tied to it. It just so happened that they caught their eye, and we kind of had those conversations. As for other ones, I think it becomes that thing where if more people see it and there's more awareness, now you have people starting to reach out to us. So it becomes, yeah, we're able to pick and choose more. Heineken, I think we looked at it and we spent a lot of time thinking about it. Is this the right beer brand? Is this? We talked with Kelly. We talked with basically everybody on our team. We don't make a decision based on money. We don't make a decision based on name or, you know, the equity that comes with like a brand itself. But we really just sat back and listened to them and said, like, why do you want to work with us? Uh, and the fit and everything was right. It just made sense. And especially with Kelly being a big beer fan too, it helps a little bit with both when the hosts and everything kind of fits perfectly. So I mean, for that one specifically, that was just like we got lucky. And
Nah,
now
no such thing as luck.
moving forward, I mean, we'll have a little bit more we have more structure, and I think every day we learn, like, you know, to have more process and protocol to how we do some of these things.
Yeah, I think it is really, and just having the name Heineken, right? Everybody knows Heineken, like across the world. So the worst case scenario is you guys are now attached to this gigantic beer brand that people know about, which again is only helpful. I am curious though, especially, again, your demographics, everything with so many young girls. Was that kind of a conversation too? Like, hey, like, promoting this beer brand, like, I'm sure again the podcast demographic is going to be a little different than just a social demographic, but I'm sure that had to be a little bit of the conversation, right?
100%. And I think that was one of the tougher parts of the conversation. I think we reach a pretty broad audience, and I would say a lot of it is, you know, Gen Z, a little bit skewed younger. Excuse me. But it's one of those things that at the end of the day, it fit perfectly with the scale of the athletes that we worked with. I don't think it did. We made sure that the branded partnership didn't dictate the creative. That was 100% the deal breaker. So basically we made the podcast exactly how we wanted to make the podcast. Integrations with ads. It's kind of like when you watch any other sporting event, right? It's not like as a kid I was watching Bud Light commercials. It doesn't mean that, you know, because the Knicks did it, I wanted to drink at like 10 years old, right? So you hope that, you know, with smart marketing, we can make sure that the right message gets the right people. and the help of Instagram and stuff like that, we had branded ads that specifically ran for 21 plus. So
Mhm.
most of our creative that was on our site did not include any mention of Heineken, to make sure that it can reach the audiences that if you're a young girl and you really love Chloe Kim, you can go and listen to our episode and you understand that it's out there for you.
I love it. Yeah, and I think that's the best way to go about it. I think there's nothing wrong with it, as you said. Kids watch sporting events all the time. What's like the number one sponsor is beer companies. So like, I don't think it's a problem. I was just kind of curious what those conversations look like behind the scenes. And Jesse, the last thing, I'm just kind of curious, like you've been here for a little while now, coming up 6, 7, 8 months, whatever it is. What's did I surprise you with that? You kind of look like, whoa, I haven't been here for a minute, haven't I?
Yeah,
What are some of the things that you guys are working on behind the scenes that maybe you could kind of just, tease our interest a little bit with?
yeah, I can give you a little teaser. I guess, yeah, podcasts. I mean, I kind of spoke on it a little bit. We want more. I keep saying in my head, I'm like, yeah, the Kelly one works. It's amazing. But what's number two? What's number three? What's number four? And obviously, like, I think podcasts for us today works because we're so disconnected with the pandemic and with safety and everything. I'd love to, branch farther, eventually like getting that visual component. Yes, we can have a Zoom stream, but would it be great in the studio? Yeah. And so I think like plussing up production would be a major plus down the road. More shows, whether it be, Instagram lives, just more. I think that's kind of the biggest thing. I think a lot of the women's sports community wants content. And so obviously we can force feed, highlights and everyday moments that make us happy. And it's been great for the pandemic and for our mood and morale. But down the line, I want more original content to be the thing for women's sports. Like it shouldn't be a thing that we think of like, oh wow, this is like, we have to get past the point where it's like just women's sports is the only one that's doing this. Like if there was 10 options, we're okay with that. We're okay having competition because competition makes everybody better. So I think for us, like we're hoping to be a leader in that space and to start building, whether it's a show specifically streamed or something different that you haven't seen before, we're willing to take those bets. So I think you'll see a lot more original content coming through for us, hopefully this year and just moving forward.
I love it. I just spoke with Haley. I said, when are we going to start seeing streams on the website? Give me some of those games that are coming up. What Sports Center, but just Women's Sports Center. I think there you go. That's an easy one. Like all that shit is definitely very excited for it and very grateful for this conversation. So Jesse, tell everybody where they can find you and where they can find Just Women's Sports and where to sign up for everything. Because again, I already signed up for all of it. I don't remember any of the links or anything though.
Yeah, I'll start. I mean, I don't think anybody really wants to see me, but you can find me on Instagram, I guess. My name, Jesse Louie. Everything else, justwomensports.com. We have some good stuff coming up, like you said. Merch is coming back very soon. We're getting some restocks there. We're doing some bigger things there. The newsletter, sign up on justwomensports.com. You can find us on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, all of them, probably Clubhouse in the future. We're working on some stuff. So, I mean, for the most part, literally find all of that stuff aggregated on our website, justwomensports.com.
Justwomensports.com. And again, sign up for that newsletter. It is absolutely fantastic. Jesse, this was great, man. I sincerely appreciate your time. This was absolutely fantastic from one Rutgers alum to another. Hope all of our teachers are doing well. But no, this was awesome, man. Thank you so much. And hopefully everyone got something out of the conversation. Bye, everybody.